What does Washington mean to the new rich?
Well, a lot of these wealthy people, you know, you make your fortune and then you have to say, well, what do we do with it? What do we do with our lives now that we're 42 years old and we have $500 million? And so you buy the house you've always wanted in Aspen, you buy the plane you've always wanted, and that's fun for about 5 years. And then you say, well, I'm just another rich guy with another big house and a nice car, and it's not that much fun. And so you look for meaning in your money, you look for a second chapter of your life.
Mm-hmm.
The two things that are emerging as that second chapter are politics and philanthropy. So you can either go and change the world through philanthropy, or you can go and change the world through politics. So DC has really become a sort of second chapter for these people's lives. The one thing they haven't got is power. The one thing they like is influence and access. And so they're buying access.
Do they think they can buy Washington?
Yes, and history
What's
would
our
show
price?
history would show that they're very successful. There's a fascinating chapter in the book called Gang of Four, which is about 4 multimillionaires in Colorado who single-handedly, I think, turned the Colorado legislature from Republican to Democrat.
Yeah,
it had been
tracked
Republican
that
for
well.
40 years. And these guys got together, put their money into Democrats. Suddenly, no one knew what hit them in Colorado. Suddenly, it became a Democratic state. So they've been very effective at influencing campaigns. If we look at the amount of money that's being raised in this latest presidential campaign by Obama, by Hillary, by Romney, you know, this is all the new rich.
Well, this is what I want you. I really want you to break down this campaign for us, because it is happening and it's subsequent to your book. Where do we see them in these candidates? Are they playing the whole field, or are there certain people who have attached in a big way to certain candidates?
I find there are 3 species of rich politicos, of rich people who want to get involved in politics. The first species are the sort of the business-minded species. These are people who want some regulatory favor or some kind of preferential treatment to get richer. Right. That's the first group. And they are banking, a lot of them, on Hillary simply because she's the odds-on favorite at this point. The second group is...
Well, do they think that she's going to be kind to them in a regulatory way?
Yes,
They have reason to believe that.
They have reason to believe that because of their experience with the first Clinton administration.
Okay.
And they're very comfortable. I mean, so many people that I interviewed for this book and that I talked to tell me about, oh, I just had lunch with Hillary, or Hillary was just over yesterday for a fundraiser. I mean, I can't imagine that she has time to be in the media, because I know that she's spending so much time in the mansions of this country raising money. The second breed, I think, is more ideological. These are the wealthy people who are really just tired of what's happened in the Bush administration. They're tired of the Democratic Party. They've taken a sort of entrepreneurial approach to politics and decided to kind of reinvent politics by funding their own causes and funding their own candidates. A lot of them are going toward Obama. Some of the other candidates, but the reason for them being involved in politics is really more ideological. They really think that the GOP has sort of abandoned its financial and economic principles, and they want something new. And the third group, I would say, is more the sort of party crowd that really just likes rock stars and politicians.
Buying into a good time.
That's right, and fame. You're really super wealthy. The next thing you want is sort of fame, or to be near fame, and so they just like being around Hillary and hanging out with Bill and saying that they did that, and so it's good cocktail chatter, and okay, it costs $20,000 to go to a couple functions with them, but it's worth it to sit around the table the next day at a dinner party and say, oh, I was just with Bill last night, blah blah blah. So that's the third group, and they're willing to spend a lot of money to do that.
Is the big money skewing more toward the Democrats? Because we always think traditionally of the Republicans as the party of the rich.
It is. There's no breakdown of, you can't measure the entire universe of wealthy people, but there are some studies that suggest that, for instance, if you're in lower Richistan, which I define as between $1 and $10 million in net worth, you tend to vote and support Republican candidates, because you're really voting on tax issues.
But 1 to 10 million, in your eyes, you're just barely on the radar.
And most Richistanis would not say you're in Richistan if you're 1 to 10. I put them in there just because I don't like to be an elitist, but 1 to 10 in most people's eyes is not wealthy. But when you get up to Upper Richistan, which is 100 million or more, they tend to vote, I wouldn't say Democratic, but certainly toward issues that are often associated with the Democratic Party, like healthcare, like education, like the environment. And the reason is they have so much money that they're less concerned about taxes. They're not voting their wallet anymore. They're voting long term because their investments are out over 50 or 100 years. So they're thinking which party is going to represent long-term causes better. So the Upper Richistownies tend to vote Democratic with a D. Lower Richistan tends to vote Republican. And I think that's been my experience also in interviewing a lot of these people, that the super wealthy have tended to fund Democratic causes recently. And maybe that's because they know that the pendulum is swinging that way,
right,
and that's where the access and the favors will be.
And it's interesting too, because you break down there these people who are politically connected, but then there's a whole another species that has formed with this new money, this new money that you call social philanthropists, that are trying to change the world through their foundations. And I suppose Bill Gates is the king of all social philanthropists. Would you say?
He is. He's the sort of patron saint, and they also are called venture philanthropists, like venture capital venture philanthropists. And the idea here is that,
but they don't want their reward to be money. They want their reward to be a change.
Social profits, as they call
social
it.
profits.
And this has sparked a huge debate in the philanthropy world, because these are people who, they came up with some great algorithm on the internet, or they started, a ceramic village company, what have you. Suddenly they believe they can solve complex problems like poverty, healthcare,
AIDS in
education,
Africa,
AIDS in Africa, whatever. And maybe they can, and maybe those business principles are just what those problems need. But what these people do are really directly apply their business experience and their jargon and all of the practices that they use in starting companies to a social problem. So the guy in my book, Philip Berber, he's in Texas, and he started an online trading company. He decided to help fight poverty in rural Ethiopia, one of the most complex problems on earth. And
how much is he worth?
He's
at the outset of this project.
At the outset, he's worth of around $250 million. He's put $100 million so far into it. He'll put more of it in later. And he basically has said, I'm not going to give a dime to CARE, to UNICEF, to all of those big groups that he sees riding around in fancy Land Rovers in Ethiopia, writing big, thick reports and not really doing anything. He spent time with his family in rural Ethiopia, asked the locals, what do you need, and how can I bring it to you? So they needed water wells, they needed schools, they needed veterinarian clinics, and he figured out a business strategy to deliver those things to Ethiopia at half the cost that the other big charities are doing it. So in my mind, he's been successful, but it's caused this huge furor by CARE, for instance. It says in my book, look, he'd be better off, sticking to internet companies and staying out of our business, which is to help these complex problems on earth. So I think that this whole venture philanthropy world is a renaissance in philanthropy. We are seeing a sort of golden age of philanthropy. Never before have so many people given away so much money, and they're doing it really differently than philanthropists of the past.
But it's a learning curve.
It is, and there have been mistakes along
and
the way.
you say, I think maybe this was in your blog, it could have been the book, but that you found in your talking to these people that they prefer giving away they enjoy giving away their money more than they enjoy spending it. Is that correct?
Yes, and I think the caveat to that is they enjoy spending their money as long as they can see results. And they don't like to write a check, most of them anyway, don't like to write a check just to write a check. They want to get credit for doing with it, rather than giving money to established foundation. Part of this is about ego. If you give money to CARE, you're just another giver to CARE, and when CARE does something, CARE gets the credit. If you're the Philip Berber Foundation, your water well in Ethiopia says the Philip Berber Foundation. Now he's done a great thing, and he's done it at a lower cost, but a lot of this is about getting credit for the things you're doing.